tab 9 is writing polynomial functions and models. So now they're going to give us a graph and we have to come up with an equation off the graph. Okay, so what do we know about this graph? Look at it and tell me what you know.
There's a 3-degree.
You know that it has at least a third degree. Good. How many x-intercepts are there currently?
3. 4. Wait.
No, 3x. How many y?
Oh, okay.
How many y?
1.
1. Okay. When I go to write a polynomial function, here's the standard form of a polynomial function. Y equals a times x minus or plus something, x minus or plus something, okay? However many I need. How many do I need on this one?
1, 2, 3, 4.
No.
Oh.
Need 2. Need 3.
I need 3 because there are 3 x-intercepts. So if I went to write this equation out, okay, I have to do a little work, but I'm going to say y equals a, because I got to figure out what that leading constant is, okay? And then this changes to x. Is it minus 4 or plus 4?
Plus 1.
Plus 4. What does this change to?
Minus 1.
Minus 1. And what about this?
Minus 3.
Okay. Now, the reason I need a y-intercept is because then I can plug 0 in for anywhere there's an x and -6 for anywhere there's a y, and I can solve for a to create my equation. So I'm going to say -6 equals a, 0 plus 4, 0 minus 1, 0 minus 3. Okay. Do you see how that works? Now, I simply do what the order of operations say. So 0 plus 4 is 4, 0 minus 1 is -1, 0 minus 3 is -3. So I have 4 times -1, which is, and then -4 times -3, which is, so I get 12a. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Equals -6. What do I do from there?
Divide
By?
Yes.
No, by.
12.
Oh, wait.
So a equals, what is -6 over 12 reduced to? -1/2. Now, I can plug that into my equation. So I have y equals -1/2, and I have x plus 4, x minus 1, and I'm going to move this out of the way, and x minus 3. I'm not done. What do I need to do now?
You
Well,
put.
actually, I think the book lets us. Actually, I think the book lets us keep it that way. So this, you can keep it this way.
Okay.
But
the next step would be find y.
no,
We found.
Oh.
the next step would be FOIL.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Then take that and FOIL it with this, and then multiply -1/2 in, and that's when you're going to get x cubed, -x cubed plus da da da, you know, like that.
So then, it's fine.
But you can leave it like this.
Wait, so how do you get the 0?
How do I get 1, 0?
0 for the x.
Because this was my y-intercept. They always have to give you one y-intercept. And your y-intercept means that x is always 0. So you plug in 0, and you plug -6 in for y. 0 anywhere there's an x, and -6 in for y to solve for a.
So, on this, that's what you recommend, leave it like that.
Yep, just leave it like that. Okay? So that is what we're going to look like on our homework. What?
So that's what we're gonna. That's our answer.
That's your answer. That's the equation
So
of
we
that.
can't go any further.
Nope, that's the equation of that graph. Y equals -1/2, x plus 4, x minus 1, x minus 3. Which makes sense because my end behavior is going up as I put negatives in and going down as I put positives in. And it's that in figure, yes?
Yes.
Okay? And if you look at that chart that you guys have, okay, the end behavior that way means that this leading number is negative. Okay? So that's the first part of the lesson, just creating equations off of graphs. You have to have x-intercepts, you have to have a y-intercept, okay? So on your homework, you're going to have pictures like that, or they're just going to give you a list of numbers. Let's take a look at when they just give us a list of numbers and solve that, and then we'll come back to this. Let's say they say, create an equation off of the following intercepts. Okay, and they give you these. They say, negative 4, 0. They say 0, 10, 2, 0, and 5, 0. How do I start my equation? Off of those when it's not on a graph.
You would.
How many x-intercepts do I have? Which ones?
2, 3.
Negative 4,
Negative 4, 2, and 5.
So x-intercept, 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 making this my what?
Y.
Y-intercept. Okay, so if I have 3 x-intercepts, my equation starts with y equals a, right?
Yes.
Okay, change this one.
Plus x plus 4.
X plus 4
X
X
minus 2.
and
X plus 5.
now what's my next step in this?
10 equals
Yes, use my y-intercept. 10 equals a.
0 plus 4, 0 minus 2.
Okay. Which means I have 4 times negative 2, which is,
Negative 8,
and negative 8 times negative 5, which is,
40.
so I get 40, a equals 10. Now what do I do?
Divide by 40.
Okay, and what does 10 over 40 reduce down to?
1/4.
1/4. Now, rewrite it in my equation form. What do I say?
Y
Y,
equals
4th, x plus 4, x minus 2, x minus
And on this one, it says write a cubic equation. So if it says cubic, that means I need to FOIL this so that it's in x cubed form, okay? If it just says create a function, you can leave it in this form. If it tells you cubic, quadric, whatever, you have to FOIL. Okay, so help me do this. We're gonna worry about this 1/4 at the end. What happens here?
x squared.
X squared, and then I get negative 2x, right?
Yes.
And then
Positive
4x, and then negative 8, and I have this. Now, if I look inside, what happens with these two?
It becomes 2x.
It becomes 2x. Okay, now, from here, I have to do this again.
Yes.
So I get x cubed, right? I get x squared times negative 5, which is negative 5x squared. I get 2x times x, which is 2x squared. I get 2x times negative 5, which is negative 10x. I get negative 8 times x, which is negative 8x. And negative 8 times 5, which is 40. Combine like terms, right? Y equals 1/4 x cubed minus 3x squared
Yes.
minus 18x, right? Plus 40. Now, what do I have to do with this?
Distribute.
Distribute. Y equals 1/4 x cubed. What is 1/4 times negative 3?
Negative 3/4.
Negative 3/4. Negative 3/4 x squared. What is 1/4 times negative 18?
Not read.
Can 4 go into 18? No, so you're going to give me a decimal answer. What is it? Or you can give me a mixed number. I don't care either way.
4.5.
4.5. So negative 4.5 x. And then what's 40 divided by 1/4 or times 1/4?
10.
10. Now, because it said cubic, I now have it in cubic function. If it says write an equation, you leave it. If it says write it in cubic, quadric, square, whatever, you have to FOIL it out.
Okay.
Okay? So that's your clue. If it says cubic, I'm just going to change this so that it looks, create a cubic, okay, function. If it says cubic, quadric, squared, you go all the way out. If it says create an equation, you can leave it. Okay, cool?
Yes.
Okay, the last thing we need to talk about is something called a finite difference. The finite difference, okay, is when the x values in a data set are equally spaced. The differences of consecutive y values are called finite differences. So these are equally spaced, the x values, right? Because anything in parentheses with an f means I'm plugging that in for x, correct? So these are evenly spaced. 1, 2, 3, 4, yes? Okay. The finite difference is the value between the outputs. So if I have 1 and 4, if I input a 1 and get a 1 out, and I input a 2 and get a 4 out, the difference between those is 3. If I input a 2 and get a 4 out, and input a 3 and get a 9 out, the difference is 5. If I input a 3 and get a 9 out, input a 4 and get a 16 out, I get 7. Look at this. 3, 5, 7. What do you think would come next here?
You put a 4, you get 16, you put a 5,
9.
you get 25.
Yes, 9 and 25. Good, both of you are correct. So if I put in a 5, I should get 25 out, which means this difference should be 9. Okay, what's the difference between 7 and 9? 2. Okay, here's what happens. This is a cubic function. And I know it's a cubic function because of how many rows I go. Not a cubic function, square function. Look, 1 row of outputs, two rows of difference, I get a row that's all the same numbers. I have a squared function.
So
Okay.
there's 3 rows?
Right, because there's 3 rows. And remember, it's always 1 less power than how many I have. Okay, sorry, there's 3 rows, so I have a square function. Look, here's why. What's 1 squared?
1,
What's 2 squared?
4,
3.
9.
Sorry. 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25. I have a pattern going on.
So essentially you're squaring the number.
Right.
It's following, okay.
So however many rows I have, if I subtract 1 from it, that's the power. Okay, 1, 2, 3 rows.
Like,
power
like
is
the
2.
degree.
Yes, like the degree. Okay, so up here, look at this. I input a 1, I get a 1 out. I input a 2, I get a 3 out. Okay, input a 3, I get a 6, 4, 10, 5, 15. Okay, we're going to start by, let's figure out what the difference is, and then we're going to come up with an equation of this pattern.
5. 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, the difference between this is what?
2, 3, 4,
2, what's it here?
3,
3, 4, 5. Gotta keep going. What's the difference?
1,
1.
1. Nope.
1.
Cole, it's always going to come out positive. I'm not putting, well, not necessarily, but
For this half.
for this is what it looks like. This looks what it looks like. Okay, now here's the kicker. Now I have to do some thinking, okay? When I input a 1, I get a 1 out, yes? But when I input a 2, I get a 3 out. So I've got to come up with an equation that when I input a 2 into that equation, I get a 3 out. But when I input a 1, I get a 1 out. When I input a 3, I get a 6 out. Okay? So this has a difference of 2 between it. This has a difference of 3 between it, 4 between it, 5 between it. Okay? So I'm going to go off of that pattern a little. This is going to be the hard part. Okay? The next number, what would be the difference between this number and the next number? 6. Okay, so let's think. 15 has a difference of 6 with what number?
21.
21. So that means when I put in a 6, I get a 21 out. Yes? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. What would be the next number here?
7, so
And what's the difference?
28.
Okay, so f of 7 gives me 28, right? Okay. So now that I've extended my pattern a little, I might be able to figure this out a little bit better. Okay? If I do, if I do this number squared, what's 1 squared?
1,
1, okay? What's 2 squared?
4,
Okay, that doesn't work. But, watch this. What's 1 squared? Okay, so if I do my number squared plus my number, okay, what's 1 squared plus that same number?
2.
2, okay? How can I get 2 back down to 1?
Minus 1.
No, not minus. Multiply by what?
Oh, negative.
If I want to get 2 to 1, what do I multiply by?
Half.
Half. Okay, watch this. If I plug in a 2, what's 2 squared?
4,
4 plus 2 is,
6,
what's half of 6?
3.
What's 3 squared?
9,
9 plus 3 is
12,
12. What's half of 12?
6,
4 squared.
16,
16 plus 4 is
20,
half of 20 is.
10.
This is the formula for that pattern.
So this is requires a lot of
A
thinking.
lot of thinking.
That's
A lot of thinking. Okay. That's where we're going to stop on this.